Question 33. How is it consistent to forbid the eldership to women in our churches and then send them out as missionaries to do things forbidden at home? We stand in awe of the faith, love, courage, and dedication that have moved thousands of single and married women into missions. The story told by Ruth Tucker in Guardians of the Great Commission. The story of women in modern missions is great. Our prayer is that it will inspire thousands more women and men to give themselves to the great work of world evangelization. Is this inconsistent of us? Is it true that we are sending women as missionaries to do things forbidden at home? If so, it is a remarkable fact that the vast majority of the women who have become missionaries over the centuries also endorsed the responsibility of men in leadership the way we do. And the men who have most vigorously recruited and defended women for missions have done so. Not because they disagreed with our vision of manhood and womanhood, but because they saw boundless work available in evangelism. Some that women could do better than men. For example, Hudson Taylor saw that when a Chinese catechist worked with a missionary sister, instead of a European male missionary, the whole work of teaching and preaching and representing the mission to outsiders devolves upon him. He counts as the head of the mission, and must act independently. The paradoxical missionary strength of being weak was recognized again and again. Mary Cessa, in an incredible display of strength, argued that she should be allowed to go alone to unexplored territory in Africa because, as a woman, she would be less of a threat to native tribesmen than a male missionary would be, and therefore safer. Another example is A. J. Gordon, the Boston pastor, missionary, statesman, and founder, in 1889, of the Boston Missionary Training Institute that would later spawn both Gordon College and Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. He strongly promoted women in missions, appealing especially to the prophesying daughters of Acts chapter 2 verse 17. But for all his exuberance for the widest ministry of women in mission, he took a view of 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 12, similar to ours. Admit, however, that the prohibition is against public teaching. What may it mean? To teach and to govern are the special functions of the presbyter, the teacher and the pastor, named in the gifts to the church. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 11. Alford considers to be the same, and the pastor is generally regarded as identical with the bishop. Now there is no instance in the New Testament of a woman being set over a church as bishop and teacher. The lack of such example would lead us to refrain from ordaining a woman as pastor of a Christian congregation. But if the Lord has fixed this limitation, we believe it to be grounded not on her less favored position in the privileges of grace, but in the impediments to such service existing in nature itself. We admit that there are ambiguities in applying Paul's instructions about an established church to an emerging church. We admit that there are ambiguities in separating the Priscilla-type council from the official teaching role of 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 12. We could imagine ourselves struggling for biblical and cultural faithfulness the way Hudson Taylor did in a letter to Miss Faulding in 1868. I do not know when I may be able to return, and it will not do for church affairs to wait for me. You cannot take a pastor's place in name, but you must help Legion to act in matters of receiving and excluding as far as you can. You can speak privately to candidates, and can be present at church meetings, and might even, through others, suggest questions to be asked of those desiring baptism. Then after the meeting you can talk privately with Legion about them, and suggest who you think he might receive next time they meet. Thus he may have the help he needs, and there will be nothing that anyone could regard as unseemly. We do not wish to impede the great cause of world evangelization by quibbling over which of the hundreds of roles for missionaries might correspond so closely to the office of pastor, elder as to be inappropriate for a woman. It is apparent to us that women are fellow workers in the gospel and should strive side by side with men. Philippians chapter 4 verse 3, and Romans chapter 16 verses 3 and 12. For the sake of finishing the Great Commission in our day, we are willing to risk some less than ideal role assignments. We hope that we are not sending men or women to do things that are forbidden at home. We are not sending women to become the pastors or elders of churches. Neither have the vast majority of women evangelists and church planters sought this for themselves. We do not think it is forbidden for women to tell the gospel story and win men and women to Christ. We do not think God forbids women to work among the millions of lost women in the world, which according to Ruth Tucker was the major justification of the women's missionary movement. Even if a woman held a more restrictive view than ours, the fact that over 2/3 of the world's precious lost people are women and children means that there are more opportunities in evangelism and teaching than could ever be exhausted. Our passion is not to become the watchdogs of where women serve. Our passion is to join hands with all God's people, in God's way, to declare His glory among the nations. Psalm chapter 96 verse 3.